So this, for the purposes of the video, I've already given you the introduction, I'll just repeat it. This, what we're going to learn is not, for the next, I don't know how many sessions it's going to take us. Don't peek through it yet, because we need to make sure it's done in Ofen Masuda. You will come across people, especially on this it's a hot button topic, it's a very politically sensitive, and people will come at you with emotion, with half knowledge. And this is a gedra damashitosh lapikoris. You need to be informed. You need to know what the World Health Organization says about transgender. You need to know what the DSM-5 is. You need to know what the legal standing is. You need to also understand the arguments. You need to be informed. You need to be informed. Now, before we go any further, in this era, which is sometimes called a post-truth era, meaning, ironically, the digital age, the global village, we are flooded with information. We have access to more information now literally at our fingertips than our ancestors could have hoped to have been able to access in their entire lifetime. And it's growing exponentially. The reality is, of course, Lord Sachs used to call this narrow casting, the opposite of broadcasting. Which is, yeah, he gets it. It was a quite classic phrase of his. The idea is, and how does it work? And here, I'm afraid we have to say something about so-called fake news. And it is important for you to be smart and to do due diligence. If we're already doing the non-Torah thing, let's quote Voltaire. I think I've quoted him to you before. I'm not sure whether I've done this particular quote. Most people, when they say they are thinking, they are merely rearranging their prejudices. Mm-hmm. It is very rare and refreshing for somebody to engage in genuine objective thought. It's actually very, very difficult. How does it work today? It's very simple. Google. What business is Google in? Advertising.
Data.
Yeah, selling data. What business is McDonald's in?
Food.
Real estate. It's one of the largest real estate owners in the world.
Whoa.
But go out and research that. That's the real business it's in.
Wow.
But that's another story. Mm-hmm. But no, so I'm saying, I'm only using that as a way to get you to think, to really think unconventionally. Now, the way it works is, because Google, as you said quite rightly, is a marketing company, it's an advertising company, it is in their interest to keep you hooked, like any purveyor of any service. And the way they do it is they have very, very, very smart algorithms. And when it provides you, it sees immediately that as you click on stuff, clickbait, right? Or as when you click on, and today we're not talking about the marketing commercial preferences. We're talking about your desire for a particular slant, a particular bias in information. If it sees you clicking on Fox News, the Daily Telegraph in the UK, which used to be called the Daily Tory Graph, it's conservative. Mm-hmm. It immediately picks up and it will do something which is good and mainly bad, which is it will start suggesting and feeding to you. It picks up, without even knowing, of course, it's AI, but it picks up that this guy is conservative. And his or her preferences, they don't want to hear that abortion is awesome, or that it is a fundamental human right, and and it will start feeding you. Generally, it's not going to send you CNN, because it knows that you're not going to be interested, because you've already made your mind up about lots of things which are important to you. That is your worldview. And therefore, you will then start becoming ever so slightly smug, arrogant, possibly even delusional. Hey, I must be right. Look at all these news feeds that are confirming it's biased confirmation, isn't it? but we don't see it that way. And news, let's not kid ourselves. You are old enough and smart enough to know that there is virtually no such thing as unbiased news. It's the words you use. One person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist, or the other way around, etc. The words like murdered, killed, shot, and the BBC is a classic example, whether you agree with them or not. I'm not expressing an opinion, but for example, you'll see there's constantly criticism of, and because they are meant to be a public service, and they're not commercial. But the minute you get huge power, which is in the dissemination of information, power is held, as we know, by the media. And if they have a particular, so if you have somebody, I don't know whether it's, gone blank for a minute, any of the big media barons, right, that control large media empires, if they're, Rupert Murdoch is a case in point, for example, if their bias, as much as they may say, oh, I don't get involved in, we all know that isn't true. And the stories come out, and we know that it's just simply isn't true. It almost isn't possible. It's a vehicle for their own, almost their own political preferences. And that shapes a worldview, because people read this and people tend to believe, they believe what they want to believe. How the whole process starts is not a topic for now. But once that's there, it's very, very rare. I'll say something openly. I think I've told you this before, I don't know. I regularly buy, on my Kindle, I buy books written by liberals. Not just because I'm a masochist, which I hope I'm not. I don't enjoy the pain. But you have to challenge your own thinking. You have to, otherwise you just become lazy and complacent in your thinking and smug and arrogant. And these are not good qualities. And we need to, Elokim osas ha'adam yoshar, Hashem made us yoshar. And then v'heimo bikshu cheshbonos rabim, the biases of ego and all the other biases kick in. And we need to be as unbalanced as is possible. There's always bias. Which is why in your bundle, I have included some things which come from deliberately. I went out and I deliberately looked to bring in some stuff from CNN and the Washington Post, for example, and from a pro-transgender group on their slant, because it's important that you understand, right? We've dealt at length, exhaustively, with the halachic background, and we know where the Torah stands on that. And we've also, I hope, along the way, given you across the idea that everybody needs and deserves to be treated with compassion and dignity and respect, etc. And you absolutely can and must separate the person from their actions. A neshama, anybody who has a neshama, needs to be looked after and cared for. Sometimes we can't go along with what they want, and sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind, etc., etc. We've done all of that. But now, let's begin to delve into the fact, and it's not that easy. So I've taken a range of different things. The first thing we need to understand is, let's just see where we're going to start. I will send you the link for Matt Walsh's documentary, and you draw your own conclusions. I'm not recommending you for 1.5 hours of Bittul Torah, but that if you wish to watch it when in some downtime. And we'll come to it maybe a little bit later. Maybe one day next week I'll show you a few clips from it, because he's done a pretty good job. And the way to work it out at some level is, he is conservative. There's no question. He works with the Daily Wire, which is Ben Shapiro's outfit. Candace Owens, yeah, there's Chabura. So don't agree with by all means with everything that they say, but it is admittedly a very conservative outfit. But he's done a pretty good job. And one of the ways you can check that it's, although there's been a lot of very harsh and negative pushback, which one would expect from the left. But an IMDb rating, check out his IMDb rating. You know what that is? So the International Movie Database is the acknowledged, I can't believe IMDb. Yeah. Can't believe a rabbi, I'm telling you, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should be ashamed of it. But I do happen to know that is when people look for a film and they want to see, is it any good? Shall I waste my time watching it? well, you're always wasting your time when you're watching a film, but they look and see that anything above, it depends, I mean, you work out, but anything above 8 is pretty darn good. Again, it depends the number of views that it's got, the number of votes that it's got, but check out on this documentary, the IMDb rating, and it's so that's one way of knowing. In other words, it's not, I have watched a bit of it, I've watched all of it. He's very, very smart. He sits and talks to some people where I was bristling. I was really, and he not only controls himself, he is obviously a conservative. Talks to trans surgeons who themselves are trans and poses some questions which are really, my jaw just dropped open. But he absolutely really manages he's totally calm and respectful and does not do what sometimes people do, and this is what you must really never do. And I'm going to go off topic for 3 minutes because it's really important. When you watch various debates, there are some very opinionated atheist or left-wing scientists, such as Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris. There are a couple of others as well. Very often, what they will use, really, really interesting, and this should be a red flag. They will often use incredible sarcasm and mocking to rubbish the other side. And that should be, it happens to be the left. If the right would do it, I would say the same thing. And that's one of the, by the way, that is one of the genius markers of Jordan B. Peterson, is that, especially in that infamous Kathy Newman interview, which you do need to see, 100%. Which is one of the most astounding, because he's a clinical psychologist. And we'll talk later about him because he does come into this with the BC 16 law, through which he shot to fame. We'll come back to that later. But the thing that I admire about him most, whether you agree with everything that he does or doesn't say, is the way in which he approaches his opponents, his political opponents. He does so without resorting to the mocking, the cynicism, ad hominem, which in Latin means personal. Yeah, ad hominem type of approach, which is to belittle the view of the other person, to make fun of it. Instead, what he does with his razor sharp logic, and he pushes back sometimes very strongly, but he does so without resorting to anything which becomes personal or to make fun of the other person, the other side.
He left her speechless.
He left her speechless. I mean, you really need to go and watch. That is actually one interview you should watch, and then the analysis of it is absolutely awesome. It really, really is good. So I did digress. So this is something that, again, it's important. It's important to know that even when, and this is what Matt Walsh does particularly well, Ben Shapiro does not do it very well in my view. I think he is, it's my own view, I think he gets far too arrogant, and even though he's clearly very smart, I don't think whatever, it doesn't matter what I think. That's less important. But no, but I'll tell you why the analysis is important for you, because one of the hardest lessons for me even sometimes in my professional life, even though now I'm a little bit older, and when I was younger I fell down on this quite badly, was even if you think you're right, and even if you think you have God on your side, so to speak, even if you do, but there is still a right and a wrong way to approach this when you have another human being sitting at the other side of the table who is either in pain or is misinformed, or the only way that you will ever be successful in genuinely putting across a view that you believe is if you do it genuinely from the perspective of nothing else than wishing to help that person. And that's why you share a truth with them. The motivation is human and not religious. They converge. This is really important. I really should do a share on this. There's plenty of Torah to back this up. Take my word for it, and I'm happy to do the Torah with it. That's why Torah, who teaches Torah? Who has the mitzvah of teaching Torah? A father. Nobody else. Why? Because a father should be the only person in the world. Mother also, but that's a technical thing. Where there's Altitesh Torah Simecha, by the way. Interestingly, even though she's not Mechuyev in Torah, and I've got another shir on that. But the Torah is taught and shared and assimilated and absorbed and learnt only through the medium of love. That's what the Torah is telling us. V'shinantom levanecha. That's the only way. Because you live it, you the father live it, you are the message, and the child knows as it grows up there is one person in the world I can absolutely depend on to be there for me, whatever, who loves me because I'm part of them, and that is a father. And that is how, in that context and in that context only, the Torah says, V'shinantom levanecha. It's a father's, a school, a rebbe, shlichim. That's all, we are shluchim. In loco parentis. That's all. Do you hear that? And that is the method, that is the right way. There's a Gemara which says, Im rabcha doime lecha kamalach Hashem tzvakos Torah yivakshum mipihu. If your Rebbe appears to be to you like a malach, then you should learn Torah from him. What does that mean? So the haflah says pshat as follows. Beautiful. He says, what's the difference between a malach and a human being? We know. A malach is static. A malach can't steig. A malach is a specific expression of Hashem, a rotzen of Hashem, which is why one malach can't do two shlichos, because then it would be two malachim, as the Maral explains. Yeah. So a malach is an oimed. V'nosati loch malchim bein ha'oimdim ha'ele, the Navi says. Malach is an oimed. Is static. Human being, the very definition of being human is to be up or down. Is
that because it has one leg, so to speak? Is that connected to being static?
No, but that's another. yeah. But the pshat. So therefore, that's what it means to be human. To be human is to steig. Yes, as the Gaon says famously in Mishlei, if you're not going up, you're going down. We're never standing still. So now let's reinterpret, says the Haflah, this thing. If you perceive that your Rebbe is a malach, in other words, he's static. What does that mean? That means he's prepared to forego and to sacrifice his own steiging and to be static, because in its place he will teach you Torah. That means he cares for you. Then go and learn Torah. Isn't that genius? Beautiful pshat. Such a beautiful pshat. And the same is going to be, everybody will be your Talmud. Everybody that comes into contact with you has an opportunity to learn, to be your Rebbe or to be your Talmud. It's a two-way flow. And the only possible way that anybody will be prepared to listen to somebody else, I'm prepared and you will be prepared to listen to somebody who cares for you. Simple as that. If somebody is just doing their job, if it's impersonal, it won't work. And that's V'shinantom levanecha. That's what we see it from there. It's really, really, it's one of the most important things. If you learn nothing else from me ever, and take that away, I would, if I may humbly say, I think that's really, really, really important. Like I say, it is a bit of a separate topic, and there's plenty more Torah to go with it, but I think you get that. Therefore, having said that was a bit of a hakdama. Let's dive in. So, let us for the moment. You've got I haven't done them in order. I'm sorry, but you've got a bunch of papers here. I'll tell you what we are going to look at. We'll take out the following for the moment. Okay, we're going to do it a little bit, not backwards. We're going to go. Okay, so let's start with this. This is from psychiatry.org. This paper, the paper that looks like this.
That's the first one.
It's in your bundle. It's in there. Right, good. Okay, so this is from the American Psychiatric Association, which I suppose, so therefore, just for us, important for us to realize, is the professional body that represents psychiatrists in America. So this should be apolitical. One would hope. And no, I don't say that with any. There's no smirk behind this at all. I am deliberately trying to find I looked for something that would be as official as possible, rather than just the opinion of some news outlet, like we said before. So let's read through this, and this is important. You need to understand the following. There is a book. There is a book which psychologists and psychiatrists use, which is known as DSM, the Diagnostic. I think it's called. Statistical. I think. Manual, DSM for short. It is the Bible of psychiatrists and psychologists. It's what they use to diagnose and treat. Every now and again, this is reviewed. Definitions. What is a mental illness? What is considered? Now, in other words, one would certainly hope that the pshat is that as science progresses and there are developments in treatment and in diagnostic methods and we deepen our understanding of the human psyche, that every now and again you would need to redefine certain pathologies, certain methodologies, certain treatment modalities, and it gets republished. We are today on DSM-5, which, if I'm not mistaken, came out in 2015. I think I'll have to double check that.
2013.
Was it 2013? Okay, right. It was around about then. Yes, the publication. You're quite right. It's there. So this is the American Psychiatric Association's giving us a history of gender dysphoria. Okay, now what is gender dysphoria? And why was it removed from DSM-4 and replaced by something else in DSM-5? Mm-hmm. And remember, this is the Bible, so this is both reflective of current social trends and scientific thinking. So what does this mean? What is going on? And this is the first thing you need to know. So, history. Gender dysphoria diagnosis and history. Jack Drescher, in 2010, provides a thorough overview of psychiatric diagnosis related to gender identity, including the history and evolution of such conceptualizations. Mm-hmm. The medicalization of transgender identity and gender identity-related distress has been a controversial topic for decades. That's true. This is due in part to concerns about further stigmatization of an already marginalized group. Early theories often conflated. You know what that word means? To conflate. It's a good word in English which you should use sparingly because most people don't know it, but use it carefully. To conflate is to meld together, to merge together two ideas. It's to conflate, right? So early theories often conflated homosexuality with transgender identities and took a pathologizing stance towards gender non-conformity. Let me just break down that sentence. So in early theories, there was seen as a very strong link between transgender identities and homosexuality. And that's that's something you really need to do further research on. So he's kind of saying that this is not current thinking, but it shaped and informed the way people used to look at this, because they conflated transgender identity with homosexuality, so it was looked at as a pathology, right? It was looked to pathologize it is to say that it's non-mainstream, and therefore this is something and it's an aberration and something we need to do something about. So it's pathologized. Let's not forget. I know you knew, when were you born, if I may ask? What year? 2001.
94.
94. 2000. Okay. So I was born in 66. A great year for England. Not just because I was born or the World Cup. No. Let's not forget that not very long, I think it was 3 years before I was born, people would be hanged in public. People would be for homosexuality. So let's put it into some, here I am. I know you probably think I'm a total old fogey, but this is not that long. You need to appreciate, and that's without comment. That's without comment. That's a fact. Good, bad, indifferent, that's not the point. The point is that society has so utterly changed its stance on something which was viewed as morally repugnant. It was viewed as it was criminal, right?
Not only pathological, but criminal.
Well, because pathological, it was also considered to be criminal, even to consenting adults. And we've moved from that point, pretty much within my lifetime, to the point where it's virtually a mitzvah kind of thing. Yeah. And that's the old joke. I say the joke not to take anything lightly, but it's just lighten the tone for a minute, but it kind of puts it in perspective. You know, Yankel meets Chaim in shul one morning, and Yankel says to Chaim, he says, "That's it, I'm making aliyah." He says, "What do you mean?" He said, "Why are you making aliyah?" He said, "When I was growing up..." That does. I could say the same thing. It was homosexuality was a crime, and then it became, it's not a crime, we won't hang you. Then it's not a crime, and then it's okay, and then it's, you mustn't work against it. He said, I'm making aliyah before it becomes compulsory. And it of course it's a joke, but it does reflect. You need to appreciate the speed and the total 180 of society's stance on that. We need to know that.
And the language of it already has become almost compulsory.
We'll come to that later. Right. Yeah. We're I'm going to save that kind of for the last, because it's the most fun in a way. The compulsory language and the pronoun thing. I'm going to leave that till the last. We've got a lot of stuff to do beforehand, but we do also need to be aware. Some people call it, I'll be academic for a minute, epistemological violence, but you can look that up. But let's take a word. Let's take a word.
Woman.
No, we're not. We're going to go there later.
There's not a word anymore.
Well, we're going to go there later. Now, again, not for them. No, I'm going to take two words: gay and marriage. Let's just take those words. This is without comment. The word gay had a very specific connotation. When I was growing up, I feel gay today. I feel gay and jolly.
It's like happy, no?
It means to be exuberant, to be the world, everything's light.
That?
Yeah, sure, why not? So it was a word. That word today has, that connotation of it is gone. I mean, I haven't looked up in the dictionary recently, but it's become so prevalent, the other meaning, that if anybody were to use it today, people would raise their eyebrows, because they would automatically assume one meaning of that word. So that word in its original meaning, again, without comment, I'm not saying that it's good or bad, that's not the point. The point is you need to be aware that language, which is what we use to communicate ideas and values, is altered and shaped the whole time. And the biggest one, much bigger than that, is the word marriage. Again, for the purposes of the video, this is without comment. This is not a judgment. This is an absolute 100% fact. The word marriage, for millennia, in pretty much any culture, had one meaning and one meaning only. It meant two human beings, male and female, choosing to commit to a union together, with all the implications that had. Societal, financial, communal, hierarchical, etc., etc. That word is gone. Or rather, that single, simple meaning of that word has gone. It means now, it has a very, very different... It still means, for the moment at least, it still means man and woman. But when somebody says marriage, it could just as easily mean man and man, woman and woman. So that there's a word and a concept. So two women living together, we each refer to each other as my wife. And if you know this, or two men who have married in the eyes of the law, well, it's husband and husband, etc., etc. So there's a word. And it wasn't just a word, it was arguably one of the basic fundamental institutions upon which society was based. It was the unit which provided economic stability, which provided identity. It's a pretty important word in the construction of societies and civilizations. And again, without judgment, all I'm doing is pointing out to you that word as we always knew and understood it, has gone. Woman is in the danger of going in the same way, and we'll come to that later. Again, you need to be aware of this. You need to be aware of the speed. So, back to this. What he's saying is that because it was conflated with transgender identity, there was a pathologizing stance. Okay. Magnus Hirschfeld is credited as among the first physicians to distinguish between same-sex attraction and transsexualism. So, this fellow Hirschfeld creates a chiluk between SSA, as it's known, same-sex attraction, and transsexualism. In other words, they might be two totally different things. A boy who is distressed and feels that they should be a girl, or vice versa, is not necessarily connected to same-sex attraction. This was followed in 1949 by David Caldwell, who proposed one of the earliest diagnostic conceptualizations related to gender identity with the term psychopathia transsexualis. Very technical. Fine. Yeah. In 1966, Harry Benjamin published, and him I have heard of, published his foundational text, The Transsexual Phenomenon, and is credited with popularizing the term transsexual as it is used today, educating medical professionals about transgender people and pioneering hormonal treatments to facilitate gender transition. Fine. This is a history. This is just a brief now. Despite increased attention to transgender people, the first two editions of DSM contained no mention of gender identity. It was not until 1980, with the publication of DSM-3, that the diagnosis transsexualism first appeared. In 1990, the World Health Organization followed suit and included this diagnosis in ICD-10. ICD is what the WHO uses. They don't use the DSM because DSM is published by the American Psychiatric Association, so it's more international. But so then we have a diagnosis of transsexualism. So in 1980 with the DSM and 1990 with the World Health Organization. With the release of DSM-4 in 1994, transsexualism was replaced with, quote, gender identity disorder in adults and adolescents. In an effort, and the language was changed, the pathology hadn't changed, but the language was changed in an effort to reduce stigma. However, controversy continued with advocates and some psychiatrists pointing to ways in which this diagnostic category pathologized identity rather than a true disorder. So what is this? Is this merely some sort of identity crisis? In other words, is it a mental disorder? Is it a pathologized identity issue, or is it a medical condition? It's a true disorder. Okay? Without comment, let's keep going. With the publication of DSM-5 in 2013, gender identity disorder was eliminated and replaced with gender dysphoria. Dysphoria. So, guys, get out your phones. It's the only time you'll hear this from me. The only time. I don't know. You haven't even got it with you. Awesome. I love it. Mama Shatzadi. Just please Google the word dysphoria. D-Y-S-P-H-O-R-I-A. Do it in German. Dysphoria. Well, I'm interested in seeing what you come up with. Kannst du das auf Deutsch sagen auch?
Ja.
Vielleicht langsamer, aber bitte.
Also Dysphorie wird eine Störung des emotionalen Erlebens, Affektivität bezeichnet, durch eine ängstlich bedrückte,
pressure,
like bedrückt is more like sad, traurig gereizte Stimmungslage, like a depressive state, and a nervous state. Die Betroffenen erleben sich dabei als unzufrieden, schlecht gelaunt, misslaunig, mürrisch.
Okay, yeah. So if you were to übersetzen bitte, if you were to put it into English, how would you?
It is a distortion of emotional perception. That's what it says.
So it's an emotional state of feeling upset, of feeling confused, anxious.
It's a Störung though.
Störung is
state of unease and dissatisfaction.
State of unease and dissatisfaction.
But right in the German one, it's a Störung,
Was ist Störung?
which is like a
disorder.
Yeah.
How would you know? Störung is
Error.
a disturbance. Disturbance. Störung. Thank you. I'm so proud of myself. Störung is a disturbance. It's
an emotional disturbance.
An emotional disturbance. Okay. So that is what it is. So gender dysphoria is the new identity. So we've moved in 2013 from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria. Now, we need to ask ourselves, and this is where we are today, gender dysphoria. So we need to do a little bit of work to understand why that change was made, what does that change mean in practice, and what does it tell us about the way psychiatrists understand this, and therefore will treat it. And how does I don't like using the word trans community for a bunch of different reasons, but it doesn't matter how, but the whole, once you start with the word community, it has some good and bad connotations. For the moment, let's just leave it. But how do trans people see this? So this is the next thing we need to understand. Let's try and understand this just a little bit. This change further focused the diagnosis on the gender identity-related distress that some transgender people experience and for which they may seek psychiatric, medical and surgical treatments rather than on transgender individuals or identities themselves. If you are highlighting anything, this is the sentence that should be highlighted. I'm going to read that again and I'm going to ask you for your comment. Because remember, this is the American Psychiatric Association explaining to us the consequence and possibly the motivation. I'm not sure, but certainly what this actually does. It's words. Again, notice, fascinating. It's always about words. I don't know if you've noticed, we've increasingly moved in society to the importance of words. Have you noticed this? It's so much about the use of words, and pronouns is there. There's your classic, the battleground of all of this is words. I'm going to quickly throw in something from the parasha, if I may.
You may. Yes.
What am I going to say? The Zohar HaKadosh says that in Mitzrayim, Dibur was in Golus. And that's why we exit with Pesach. The mouth can speak once again. It's Al Pi Kabbalah. But you need to understand there is also a connection between sexual intimacy and speech. The Mishnah in Ksubas, Daf Tesvav, Ra'uha medaberes im Ploni. I will only say this very carefully because of the delicacy of for the tape also. A woman certainly has two mouths. It's not a joke. Do you understand? And speech, bris haloshin and bris haloshin and bris hamoer, and you have a tongue. A man has two protuberances in his body, things that, so to speak, stick out. These are not do you understand? It's a bit. I'm going into Kabbalah a little bit, but you need to see there's something much, much deeper going on over here. In Golus, we are in Golus Mitzrayim, which is the prototype of all Goluyos. So Dibur was Begolus. And then we have Pesach, then Vigadata, Kolamar Belasaper. And you hear there's a lot of Torah that's going on over here. Moshe Rabbeinu and his stutter. This if you're sensitive, Ochein Noida Hadovar. Rashi in this week's parasha. Why are we in Golus? Says Rashi. Okay, now I understand. Lashon hara, Lashon hara, which is speaking, sticking out your tongue to say something that should remain private. Tznius. Tznius and Lashon hara. The Gemara Megillah makes that connection, and that's Golus. Do you hear speech, nivul peh, things that should remain private in terms of speaking, sex education. This is the battleground. Do you have what's going on? Al Pi Kabbalah. This is exactly what's going on. I'm just giving you a deeper. I know I said I would do no Torah today, but I'm sorry. Can't help myself. Do you hear? Do you appreciate there's a lot of depth, and the Rebbe has lots of sikhs on this. There's a
the difference between Lashon and Sefer.
Yeah. Once you start getting into this, it's very big. But that's why words. It's all about words. It's all about words. And if you think Salomon Shlita used to say to us, you think about Second World War. What really got things going was Mitzad Echad, Hitler's demagoguery in his oratory, and Churchill and his speeches. Again, you've got the Dibur. You start thinking like a Ben Torah, you uncover deeper patterns and themes. And what we do is we look at the world, we inform ourselves about the world, and then we try as much as possible as to see it through the lens of Torah. That's what we're trying to do. So this is the word. They moved from identity disorder to gender dysphoria. What does this do? This sentence, I was going to say it's a fridge magnet. It's a sentence here to highlight. This change further focused the diagnosis on the identity-related distress rather than on the individuals or the identities themselves. We have moved to the distress is now the focus. Right. Of course, we should be focused on people's distress, no question. Mm-hmm. But if that is now going to be used, do you see the depth, the subtlety here? If that is now going to be the determinant of whether or not this is a pathology or an illness or a disorder, all of our identities, and therefore all of our modalities of treatment and all is going to be based on the alleviation of distress. How someone feels. That becomes there. We're into this. It's there. It's mafurish. It's not me. It's not some right wing. There it is in black and white, and you need to understand that at least for yourself. That's stage one. We'll leave it for today.